to the Thursday Inside Texas Live show, joined by Pac, joined by Evan. Got two supreme ball knowers here with us tonight. We are going to be taking a guess at a little bit of an over-under game, just, some off-season content. We're going to try to project, or I've projected some stat lines for our offensive players for Texas in 2026, and these gentlemen will take the over, take the under, and, of course, we'll talk about why. My man Chris Bennett in here early. Appreciate you being here, Chris. But real quick, guys, go ahead and hop on over to Inside Texas. Join that community right now. New members join for $1. You can find a link in this video's description. It'll be the first link below. Go ahead and take advantage of that deal. Come spend some time on IT with the fellas. But for now, we're talking over-unders. Pac, Evan, hope y'all are doing well. Hope breaks were good. Busy gentlemen, so I do appreciate y'all taking the time to come over here and play some games, have some fun here on this. It feels like off season officially here now that we had the national title. One thing I want to ask, Pac, did the national championship game go as you expected?
Yeah, generally. I think I told some people about how I thought Miami's they would send the nickel on what's called like a sting pressure. So they would blitz them towards the C gap. They would drop a linebacker. They would drop a safety into what's known as Sky Sports, so they'd send them to the curl flat. And what you end up having happen a lot when you run these fire zones, which is what Miami runs a lot, is you have a lot of conflict with the RPO stuff. And you saw early in the game, especially against the fire zones, Indiana had a lot of success with the RPOs, whether it was RPO stick, RPO hitch, whatever it was. They threw an RPO slant for 20 yards. So that was kind of expected. And then you saw them play a little bit more press. You saw them bump down. Even when they weren't going to play press, they'd play press and bail. So they would show press and then get into a half turn, so turning your ass to the sideline and shuffling. And I felt like that helped a lot. Felt like it took away a lot of the quick game stuff. And then Fernando Mendoza made a lot of really, really good throws, especially against press. Some of it was great coverage. Some of it you'll look at and Miami DBs will see some eye control stuff that was really poor, but all in all, it kind of went the way I thought it would, especially on the other side. I felt like Haynes had a good idea of what to do in terms of attacking protection. And then they did a really good job in terms of they're super multiple in what they run from a coverage standpoint. And you could tell Beck didn't fully understand what he was seeing. A lot of checkdowns. And then I think it was a second down, the interception, a really good play by the corner to play what's known as a sink technique and understanding that if no one's in the flat, you can keep sinking underneath the vertical route. One, it helps protect against the hole shot, but it gives your safety a lot more time to get over there because Indiana was showing pretty much what was quarters or middle field closed at the time. I can't remember which one, but the safety's playing on the hash. And so to play a half over one technique, which is what they'll play predominantly, that's a really long path you got to go. That's about 20 yards that you need to move over to as a safety. So that was a really good job by the corner. But that's kind of what Indiana has been all year. They execute at like the highest level. They always make the right play. They understand how they're being attacked. So I would say, yeah. I think I had ended up having a final score in my prediction of something like Indiana 24, Miami 17. So kind of generally accurate, a little bit higher scoring than I thought it would be. But you also have a blocked punt for a touchdown, and then major explosive for Miami. But outside of that, it's kind of what you thought it would be.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like I didn't know if Miami was going to be able to score twice all night. So when Indiana got up early on, I thought that was a big key for them, just getting a lead, making Miami not necessarily force the issue because it was really them leaning on the ground, attacking the third quarter. They kind of got them back in that, kind of got that offense going a little bit. But how about you, Evan? Was that what you predicted? I can't remember what we decided on last week.
Yeah, I definitely had Indiana winning the game. I think it was a little more heroic, kind of what Pac was saying, than I thought it would be. I thought it would be a little bit more of a Miami's really got to dig deep in the last 5 minutes. And they had, I think it was 2 straight drives so they scored on that kept them in the game. And then, that play by the corner was fantastic, sinking deep on that. And that's a play call that you got to have someone in the flat if you're going to try to throw that ball. And I know people are going to dog on Carson Beck because of late game interception after late game interception at his career, but that's a really good play by a cornerback, and I understand why he's throwing that ball there. But, yeah, it was another game where Miami probably should have run the ball a little more. You get to the third quarter, like, how does Mark Fletcher only have 7 carries or whatever it was at? But that's what happens on Indiana's defense and that front, which is really good. A lot of grown men on that on that defensive side of the ball. Made some good plays. Yeah, I Indiana played throughout, but Miami was really – they made it a game. That was a really entertaining title game. I mean, the last, 7 haven't really been that fun. I think it was the Clemson win, the Hunter Renfrow catch was like really the last super thrilling one apart from the Keely Ringo interception. So pretty good game and just really good way to cap off such a cool season for Indiana. I was glad Mendoza got his win.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I wanted Miami to win just because I respect the lore of the U. You know, I grew up watching those Ken Dorsey teams and Ray Lewis. And I mean, for years, like Clinton Portis was one of my favorite backs of all time. Like I respect the U. So I didn't want to necessarily, sit here and look at a chance where it's like, all right, anybody can go in and walk in and win a title. Is that me coping because Texas had high expectations and kind of not necessarily fell all the way on their face, but obviously didn't reach those expectations. So internally, I was rooting a little bit for the U. And then at the end of the game, I don't love Carson Beck as a prospect. I don't love the demeanor of Carson Beck, but I still found myself wanting him to succeed there at the end of the game. And it felt like we all in the back of our mind kind of anticipated, kind of knew, what was going to go down there. And again, feel bad for the guy. Great play on Indiana's part. Indiana, obviously, as Pac said, they execute. So very impressive to watch them execute. When they make a mistake, it almost feels like the world stops for a half a second. It's like, wow, that is so uncharacteristic. You had the false start penalty on their last drive or their next to last drive, technically. And I was like, holy hell, like I am shocked that it's this program that did something like that. Plenty of others where that happens. And I'm like, oh, yeah, standard practice. I have not been to HEB, but I've seen the rumors. I've seen the reports, and I would stay away, Chris. Get it in now because I'm sure tomorrow is going to be all your last second winter shoppers going in and buying everything out. I'm going to tell you what, Texas probably should have played Miami because it should be Colorado in 2001. We wanted no part of that Miami team. It was basically, who could finish second in the regular season to get their asses kicked by that Miami team because there was nobody that was going to play them within 3-4 scores. They were pretty dang good. And again, now I'm all mad again about the Colorado loss in 2020 or in 2001, Chris. I appreciate it, man. Chris Sims, first half special. Chris Brown, Bobby Purify. Those Colorado backs are tough, man. But all right, let's get back to the point of the show. We're here. We're going to have some projections, some over/under. We're going to have some fun. And we're going to start at the top. We got to start with Arch Manning, right? I mean, I feel like it would be silly not to. We could probably talk, for the rest of the entire duration of the show specifically about Arch. But looking at 2025, 3,163 yards, a 26-7 TD to INT ratio. He was sacked 23 times. I don't like looking at that number. Without Arch Manning, that number could have been 45 though. So I mean, I guess we'll take
that's 50.
Yeah, easily 50. But I'm going to go ahead and give Arch another couple of hundred yards. All right, so I'm going to say 3,350 yards is the over/under that I'm giving you guys, and we'll go to touchdowns after this. But real quick, is that a number that you think Texas and Arch flirts with? I think I had last year going into the season, I had Arch right over, I think 3,365 is what I had projected for 2025. But how do y'all feel about that? Arch Manning 2026, 3,350 yards, over or under?
I'll take the over on that. I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that he threw, I think, for 170 against Ohio State. He threw for, I think, 110 against UTEP. He threw for 130 against Kentucky and then 180 against A&M. I don't think you're going to see him have 4 or 5 games where he's under 200 yards next year. I think the receiver group's too good as well. I mean, the Kentucky game, couple of drops. Ohio State, he clearly, again, that was his first game. You could tell a lot of things went wrong there. Same thing with Kentucky. Had some drops in the A&M game, had some drops in the Georgia game. I think you're not going to see as much of that next year, so I would pretty comfortably take the over on that. I think I might even add 100 yards or 2 to that and get up to like 3,500, and that would be kind of where I feel pretty comfortable.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. An improved ground game, hopefully it will only help the passing game as well. Yeah. You talked about the drops. You talked about, maybe his, he's a little sped up early in the season. It is what it is. He easily could have thrown for 250 to 300 against Ohio State. And then again, we weren't great against UTEP. We're not great against San Jose State. Evan, what are you taking over or under on that?
Well, I do think part of the discussion you have to have is, are we talking regular season or are we talking the whole year? And I do think that this Texas team should be able to play more than 13 games this year. We were saying that last offseason, so you never know. But I do think, like, if you're talking about a 15-game schedule, and that would insinuate that Texas doesn't win a national championship or anything like that, maybe bounce in the semis or quarterfinals, I think he's got to be over 3,300 given what he did in 13 games this year. Pac was mentioning it, kind of eliminating a few of those games, and I know cherry picking, whatever, but back half of the year post Kentucky, when he really started finding his groove, 285 a game quarterback. And if you put that up to 15 games, he's about a 400 yard or 4,000 yard passer right there. So that's a lot of nitpicking and saying, here's stats that I want to put out there that makes the guy look good. But it's hard for me to see him not get over 3,300, just given how last year went, where there were a lot of yards lost on drops, a lot of yards missed from him missing throws. But the only two reservations I would have on that is Texas plays a slow season and they don't end up making the playoffs and talking about 13 games again. B, they win really big in some of these, in the two out of conference kind of cupcake games, and he just gets taken out early and he's not getting a lot of yardage. Maybe they run the ball a lot. And then C, I do think Sark really wants to lean into this win 24-17 mentality against these good teams and not expect to blow teams out. But we're going to be methodical. We're going to run the ball well. We're going to use two tight ends a lot. We're going to have Arch use his legs. A lot of the big throws he makes are when he needs to make the big throws, and it's not going over the top of defenses every second down and actually trying to find more rhythm. So with all that being said, I still think 3,300 is a very attainable goal for him. I don't think 4,000 is going to be what it is because of those other factors, but yeah, I'll take that over every day of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, y'all named it. A lot of the factors this year, you still put up 3,100 yards. I mean, he could have very easily, if you take that back half of the season and his performances and you gel that with the first half of the season, you get that version of Arch Manning. He probably does throw for 3,400 yards really, really easily. Now, I will say this: everything is going to be treated as a 12-game regular season number. Okay, we won't do SEC title game playoffs. So even then, I feel like that's a very, very safe bet to take that over. I didn't want to do it too high. I didn't want to have people clip at me and saying, well, this idiot sitting here guaranteeing our shows for 3,500. Listen, I tried to lowball him last year because I thought there'd be some early struggles. Honestly, didn't think it'd look like it did. A few more struggles than I anticipated. But all right, let's go to touchdowns. Chris has got it right here. Single season touchdown record, 34 touchdown passes by Colt McCoy in that very, very fun 2008 season. I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to go 36.5. I think Arch has a plethora of weapons. When you have to account for Arch's legs in the red zone, the running backs that Texas will have, I think passing in the red zone should be a little bit easier than it's been in the last couple of, iterations of Texas football. But how about you guys? 36.5 touchdowns, you're going over, you're going under. And if you have to ask why we have a 0.5 on this, then you should gamble more. I'm just saying.
Well, I do think, I think 36 is an aspirational number. That's 3 a game if we're going for that 12 regular season games. So that's why I'm probably going to take the under. A lot of that does stem on those 2 out of conference games I was talking about. Are they coming out of the gate and he throws 4 or 5 touchdowns and suddenly you look up and it's 3 games into the season and he's already got 12 to 15? Then it's really attainable. But yeah, I think because the running game is going to be a lot more solid in the red zone, they're going to score more touchdowns probably. But I think it's pretty easy to see that those go to Hollywood Smothers, those go to Raleek Brown. They've already shown some of those trick plays to the Nick Townsend getting a handoff. They love their little fullback belly dives there. So I'm going to take that under. I think some of that, maybe he gets some of his legs, and if the legs are involved, then maybe I would take the over. But 3 a game that's a lot of touchdowns just for one quarterback to throw when you have a better run game in theory going into next year.
Well said, man. That's I did not say total touchdowns. If you talk about his legs plus his arm, he'll get to that number. How about you, Pac? Over under 36.5 passing tutties for Arch Manning?
Yeah, I'll take the under, but I don't think it's gonna be that far off. I do think it'll be somewhat similar to what we saw from Quinn in 2024 against what it was Colorado State, and then I think it was UTSA where he had 4 or 5 touchdowns in that game. I do think you'll see that, especially early in the year, just because, especially week 1, knowing who comes to town in week 2, I do think you want to have some level of rhythm with Arch Manning. I do think you'll see kind of in an inverse. I think you'll see them be pretty pass heavy in the first game, and then they'll slowly lean on the run later, just because you can't have last year's Ohio State game happen again to Arch. You do need to have, and there's no better way to get him into a rhythm than having a cupcake week 1 that you can have him throw the ball 30 to 35 times, get 25 completions, have a few explosives, have a few touchdowns, make him feel really comfortable heading into a really big week 2 showdown. And because I think he's going to have a lot, I think he's going to have a lot of opportunities week 1. I do think it's going to happen again in week 3 and then week 4. I do think it's going to be close, but I'll take the under. I think it'll be something where around like 33, 34. But like Evan said, 3 touchdowns a game is it's a pretty tall ask when you look at some of the defenses that Texas is probably going to play and some of the ones that are probably going to be really good.
Yeah, no, well said. I could definitely see a scenario in which you're exactly right. These defenses is going to be very competitive for Texas. You're going to have to show up and execute well on a weekly basis. I still would expect them to be very close to that number, if not over. And a lot of this because of what you both just touched on. Weeks 1, 3, and 4, he might throw for 15 touchdowns in those 3 weeks alone. You kind of talked about what Quinn did between Colorado State, UTSA, and Florida. It felt like the half of his touchdown total came in those 3 weeks. So, yeah, curious to see what G.J. Kinney and that Texas State defense looks like. They were terrible in the secondary last year. They couldn't have stopped a nosebleed. They'll be better. But, yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if you do not see Texas put an emphasis on getting, as you said, Pat, getting Arch in rhythm, making sure that he's comfortable. And, some of the, maybe some of the bugs in the system are worked out going into that Ohio State game. Again, I don't think he'll look anything like he did, in the 25 season as far as how he started it off. So 36.5 total touchdowns. I'm definitely taking the over on the passing, and I'm going to go with the over on this touchdown number as well, because I'm going to go with a couple of games where he does have, he's going to probably average 3.5 touchdowns a game, just because I do think that he'll throw plenty in the red zone. Again, his legs will be there, but I just don't know how much you want to lean on that. And when you add a red zone target like a Cam Coleman, who's maybe not the best red zone target in college football, it's a lot better than what we had in the last couple of years as far as, attacking in the red zone. So excited for that. We'll continue to go. We're going to go. What do you want to do next? We'll go, Pack. What do you want? You want running backs? You want wide receivers?
Let's go running backs.
All right. We're going to do running backs in one moment, but first we're going to hear a word from our first sponsor of the night, and that's Laura Baker.
If you're looking for a home in the Austin area, there's only one number to call. That's Laura Baker at 512-784-0505. Laura's a part of the elite Andy Allen team at Keller Williams Realty. She's helped Longhorns find their dream homes all over Central Texas. You can just ask our very own Ian Boyd, who moved from Michigan to Texas with Laura's help. Whether you're searching in Austin, Round Rock, Georgetown, San Marcos, or even parts of the 254 or the 210, Laura has you covered. So call 512-784-0505, or you can email her at laura@andyallenteam.com. She's a Longhorn, a friend of Inside Texas, and the person you need to call to get your next home in Central Texas. Call Laura Baker today. Contact info is in the description.
Alrighty, let's keep going. Pack said we're doing running backs next. Let's start with the man that went from Tempe to Austin, Texas, Raleek Brown. Obviously, this is a little bit harder to do than Arch because, you do have Raleek. You added Hollywood Smothers. We don't know exactly how this offensive line looks. But the number that I've settled on for Raleek Brown is going to be 785 yards. You taking the over on that? You taking the under, guys?
Yeah, I'll take the under on that. I think just from what I've watched, I think Hollywood Smothers is going to end up being running back 1. I just like his contact balance. I like his vision a little bit more. I think they're both pretty explosive in the open field, but to me, I think Hollywood Smothers is more likely to be the guy for Texas. So just by proxy of that, I think it'll limit the carries Raleek Brown gets. And I think Raleek Brown, in terms of if this was total yards, because I think he's a real weapon in the pass game. I think he's a good route runner as a running back. He does a good job of making guys miss in space. He understands angles really well. If this was total yards, I'd take the over. But just on rushing yards, especially not knowing what the offensive line is going to look like and not knowing what, for example, Brandon Baker is going to look like at right guard or what Melvin Siani is going to look like at right tackle against SEC edge defenders, to me, that's pretty hard for me to see 785 with all those questions. I think honestly, I'd probably if it was 585, I would still probably feel pretty that would be a push for me at that point.
Pack's like, your line is ass, bro, and that's okay. It's tough to gauge. Again, I'm kind of, I'm still torn on who I think gets the bulk of those carries between the two, but I do like Hollywood a little bit better in between the tackles, more so as an every down back. So Pack's on the under, heavily on the under there. Pack said he's putting the bankroll on that. What about you, Evan?
Yeah, I'm in a similar mind space as Pack, because that is the tough part of the question. You're at both asking what Brown's going to do, and also how does that interact with Smothers, and how does it interact with the offensive line that you're putting out there. And I do think they're going to run the ball much better this year, even with question marks about who's going to play one of the guard spots. But yeah, I think that Smothers is the better back. I was a little when they got Brown, and before I even knew that they were going to get Smothers, I was kind of saying, man, I would have slightly preferred Hollywood, but this is still a great addition, real home run hitter. I think just when it comes to these games where they're really going to have to consistently run the ball down to down, that's where you're going to see Smothers get the bulk of the carries. Like you said, Pat, getting that 550 and then 250 from the air feels very possible for Brown, because they're going to run a lot of these swing passes. He's going to be a good running back to have in the 21 personnel. But I think it's going to be 60-40 carries in favor of Smothers. I think he's a slightly better back, slightly better between the tackles as well. But there is definitely a world where Brown has a few games where he goes 5 carries but gets 80 yards on those carries because he's got really good explosiveness. And then we're talking about a 1,000-yard rusher and an 800-yard rusher, and everyone's super happy with the run game. But yeah, I'll take the under. Probably a little less pessimistic about the number than Pack was, but yeah, I'm right with you.
More than fair. I definitely, again, we don't know what that usage is going to look like. We don't know how often Sark's going to turn to Arch Manning on the ground game. And again, with Hollywood being better between the tackles, you can see him being on the field a lot more, and the third and shorts, the fourth and shorts. And again, Ralik might be more of a guy that not calling him a gadget guy, but we know what Sark can, how he uses that type of bat. We used to call him a scat back. I think he runs a little bit harder to call him a scat back, so I'm not going to do that. But I will also join you guys in taking the under. Now let's do Hollywood. You're gonna hate me because I have his at 30 yards less. I had a 765. Taking the over under on Hollywood Smothers.
Yeah, I'll take the over on that. To me, if there's going to be 1,000-yard back, and I think there will be, I think Hollywood Smothers is more likely to be the 1,000-yard back if there is one for Texas. Like Evan said, I think he's really good in between the tackles. And I think what makes him so valuable, and what I think is going to be really, really important, is he does a really good job of just falling forward. The Miami guys did a really good job of this. Indiana did a really good job of this. And you could really see it on Monday how they would turn what looked like 2 yards into 4 yards or into 5 yards. And going from 2nd and 8 to 2nd and 5 for an offense is a really different thing. It allows you to have your playbook be much more open. I think that's something that Hollywood Smothers is going to be able to do. And then I just think, like Evan said, because he's so good in between the tackles and he has such good vision, I do think you're going to see it may not be where Ralik Brown will have 5 carries and it'll be 90 yards. But for Smothers, it's 20 carries and he's able to give you 110 yards. And he's just consistently able to drive piles and get you good yardage. So I'll take the over on that.
Yeah, we're getting horrible content here because we keep agreeing, Pack. But my thing is, I would not be surprised at all. I don't think either of you would be if Brown is better per touch and has a higher yards per carry, yards per touch would be the word with the receiving yards. And that's the way they use them, where they find specific ways to get him out into space, more opportunities to get put one-on-one with the guy and just beat him to a spot. I talked about this earlier, but one of Brown's biggest strengths is when we got him, and I know people like the yards after contact stats, one I like a lot. One of the problems, the reason his was so low is because he'd beat dudes to a spot and not get touched, so it would hurt his yards after contact number when he'd get an explosive play. But yeah, Smothers comes in with a little bit more experience, like more football played, even though he's the younger player, has one more year of eligibility left, which I think that helps early in the season against Ohio State. And then if that's how it's going to be, where they're going to lean on him a little more early on, and then I do think UTEP it is UTEP or UTSA, sorry, and Texas State, they're going to get some even carries, and they're really going to try to get Cooper and Simon involved in case they need to use them. So I think early in the season you see Smothers more. Brown really gets utilized, like Oklahoma, when they're talking about needing to get guys really out into space and have a lot of athleticism on the outside. That's where he's going to really show up. But I think Smothers is going to get an early lead on him and then sustain that. I don't know if I'm quite there on a 1,000-yard rusher in the 12-game span because there's 2 guys who are going to split a lot of the carries, but I do think Smothers hits that over that you set court. I think he's the better of the two running backs. I think he's going to be used a little bit more. But Brown seems to be very all right with that, and he seems okay with this role that he's in. So I'm very excited for these two.
You got to think, I mean, it's, with a lot of people throw the word the elites around way too often. And I don't think these are elite backs by any means, but I think you found two backs that complement each other very well, that have some home run hitter potential. And then obviously a clear upgrade from what you had last year, especially in making guys miss yards after contact, those type of things. Would y'all agree, or am I kind of underselling these backs here?
Yeah. I wrote recently this is the best duo since Bijan Roschon, and
yep.
I think Brooks was probably the better back of the three just that 1 year, but I'd take these guys over freshman Baxter for sure.
Absolutely. How about you, Pac?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I don't think they're elite, but I think in combination with each other, I think it's a really good running back room. It's one you feel really comfortable with, especially when you combine the fact that you now have the quarterback's legs involved. Right, that's going to change how teams play him, or teams play the run. I didn't talk about this yet, but like a lot of edges, just as an example, when it was Quinn Ewers, a lot of edges, they wouldn't surf, right? Like they wouldn't get on the line of scrimmage and play patient, knowing that you can get a QB keep on like zone read, for example. With Arch, because he is a threat to pull it, and he's a threat to be able to go 60 yards. I just have to play a lot slower, right? They can't bend and chase. They can't aggressively pursue a halfback. They have to play a bit slower. And what that does is it allows your running backs a little bit more time. It removes a guy basically from the run count. And so that'll be a really big positive for Texas. And I think that's part of why I'm a believer that Hollywood Smothers, especially between the tackles, is going to end up having a really high rush total towards after the 12 games.
Yeah, and I think as Victor said in the chat, of course, having some issues, so we can't put it up, but Arch being the goal line back is going to matter a lot, at least when it comes to touchdown numbers. I do think that some of Sark's game planning this year did take into account that, hey, if we're going to have 2 years of this guy, we don't need him to take as many hits as possible. And that's, if you know you're going to have him in 2026, that's when you can really unleash when you really, really need it, having his legs involved. You look at the red zone plays from Texas this year, it was far fewer Arch QB runs than you'd probably expect. They tried to throw the ball a lot. I mean, you see the Nick Townsend one late in the year against Texas A&M. That wasn't always the go-to. There were a lot of plays where either he ended up scoring some scrambles, or they just scored a lot from 30 yards out, but not within the 20s. And the red zone's been a problem for Texas for a while. But you've got a better running quarterback than you've had since Sam Ehlinger inside that red zone area. You got better running backs than you usually have. You got a guy in Cam Coleman who replicates what you had in Matthew Golden the year before, but instead of going towards the pylon in the front, he's going towards the back and making some one-handed catch where he has a 45-inch vert. So it's going to be better, and I think you're going to see him use his legs more because, hey, there's two more run threats that you have to account for every single play.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly, man. I will ride with the over on Hollywood as well, just because y'all talked me into it a little bit. Y'all seem pretty dialed in on him being the better of the two backs. Let's do touchdown numbers for both. For Raleek Brown, going to set it at 7.5. What are we thinking there? Over 7.5 tutties or under?
I think I'll take the over because of the explosiveness. I mean, I think there's going to be a few games that Texas can run it up a little bit. And he's a run it up kind of running back where teams are tired. You get him out into space and boom, he's gone. So he'll probably have a few goal line carries. But yeah, I think that's a fair one to take the 7.5 for 12 games for a running back who I can't forget exactly how much he had last year. But Smothers wasn't a huge touchdown score for NC State. And Brown's probably going to be a little more involved in the passing game. So I like that one.
Can I push this? I could see it being like 7 or 8. I'm not sure that I would
good line
definitively take the over, but I think it'll be close to that, whether or not it's 8, 9, 6, 7, whatever it is. You just made me laugh. I didn't realize I did it until I saw you laugh. But yeah, I don't know. Anywhere from like 6 to 10 I could see, but like I could pretty comfortably see 6 as well as I could see 10, because like Evan was saying a few seconds ago, Arch, and as Victor was saying, Arch is probably going to be the goal line back. So once you get inside the 5, I don't know how many like true carries Smothers or Brown are going to get. especially because I do think if it's inside the 5, I tend to think Smothers is going to be the main back there, or it might be a Derek Cooper or a Michael Terry, a bigger back, someone that you trust a little bit more to get those yards. That I'm not so sure that Raleek Brown will be that, where I think a lot of his touchdowns are going to be, like Evan said, really explosives, where he's made it's like 10 plus yards pretty consistently. So it could go either way. If I have the option, I'd push it. Otherwise, I think I'll barely take the under.
I could agree with both of you. I fully agree there, Pack. It could be anywhere 6, 9, 10. What is he? I I definitely piggyback on the sentiment that he's probably not going to see a lot of touches inside the red zone unless it comes via the pass. Yeah. And that's where you could see him. It's tough for me, to know exactly what his role in the passing game looks like. I could definitely see a situation in which he has 4 or 5 on the ground. He has another 3, 4 on, through the air. And so how does Texas use him in the red zone? We'll see. But I definitely agree with y'all that, you're very much more likely to see Hollywood, a Derek Cooper, even a Terry, inside the red zone, especially once you get down there around the goal line. But yeah, Arch is going to it feels like Arch is going to get the bulk of the carries, especially when we play better teams. That's when I feel like, maybe early on you see these guys get involved a little bit in the goal line offense, but time will tell. Let's do Hollywood Smothers. Again, Evan, you mentioned he wasn't a big touchdown guy last year for the Wolfpack. He had 7 total, 6 on the ground, 1 through the air. We're going to go 10.5 though, because he's playing for, in my opinion, what's going to be a much better offense. You have a passing game that, teams are going to have to respect. And then as you guys have both kind of pointed out, you like Hollywood to be RB1 a little bit better than Raleek Brown. So what are we thinking for Hollywood? 10.5. You going over, you going under?
Let me just say, by the way, I'll finish after this. I dislike how their names are Hollywood and Brown, because the amount of times I've almost called one of them Hollywood Brown on this show is a little too much. OU legend Hollywood Brown. As for Smothers, are we saying this is just for rushing yards, that 10.5 number? Or rushing touchdowns, excuse me.
This is just rushing touchdowns, and which I guess on Brown, I just contradicted myself because I was, including receiving touchdowns. Let's just do rushing touchdowns for Hollywood.
Yeah, I'm going to hit the under on that. Again, it's kind of the same things we've talked about. Arch being the goal line guy. I think we're a little less likely to see the ones where you're running the ball at your own or at the opponent's 40 and that turns into a touchdown, which Texas really didn't have this past year, and I think they're going to start having in this season round. And he's probably just going to get a lot of these important, good carries, but I don't know how many of the ones he's going to do that Kenneth Walker meme where he's doing all the work as he gets down the field and someone else gets the last touchdowns, the Zach Charbonnet. I think there's going to be a few vultures where it's going to have a really good drive and then he doesn't get that touchdown. And 10.5, that's a lot of scores for an offense that has a lot of mouths to feed. So I'm going to hit that under. But, I would not be surprised at all if this is a 1,200-yard, 12 touchdown back at the end of the year.
Yeah, well, so what about you, Beck?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a real shot that he just far exceeds and he gets to 12 or 13 or 14. But just because I do think, like we said, because this is Arch Manning's last year at Texas, and because of this skill positions that Texas has, especially outside, I think you're going to see them be pretty pass heavy. Not necessarily to the point of 70-30, but I think you could see 55-45, 58-42, that type of thing. And I think that will limit the amount of rushing touchdowns that Texas is going to have when it's not Arch's legs. So I'll take the under, but not an under because of ability, just because of an opportunity thing to me.
Well said by both of you. You got a lot of mouths to feed on this offense. We haven't even got into wide receivers. Sarklov's a good tight end. There's a lot of ways that this offense should be able to get the ball in the end zone next year. And like you both said, plenty of mouths to be fed and guys that you got to take care of. And then again, you're just ultimately what's best for Texas. What's their best chances of putting the ball in the end zone? And, is that using Raleek in the red zone? Probably not. Is that using Hollywood? More outside the red zone, and then having Arch as your goal line threat and being +1 in the run game. It definitely makes a lot of sense. So well said by both of you guys. We're going to go back to our sponsor break. We're going to hear from David McClellan, and then we're going to pick up and talk a little wide receivers and a little tight ends.
Big financial decisions don't have to feel overwhelming. There's someone who can guide you every step of the way. David McClellan is a fiduciary financial advisor with Forum Financial, and he's working closely with his clients as a true financial life coach, guiding every aspect of your financial journey with expertise and care. If his name sounds familiar, that's because David was a swimmer at Texas and a member of several national championship teams. Today, he channels that same championship mindset into helping people win with their finances. David specializes in financial planning, and he's contributed numerous articles to Kiplinger on the topic of retirement tax bombs. And right now, David is offering viewers a free intro consultation to assess your financial situation. Do not miss this chance to get personalized guidance from a trusted expert. To schedule your free consult, email David at dmcclellan@forumfinancial.com, or you can call him directly at 312-933-8823. The contact info is in the description.
All right, guys. We're moving to wide receivers. Got a couple. We'll do wide receivers. We'll do tight ends. We'll wrap up the show. And we're going to start with a guy that was in burnt orange last year. I know a lot of people think we'll start with Cam, but let's go to Ryan Wingo, who had, the guy put up decent numbers. At the end of the day, it was a little over 800 yards, if I'm not wrong. And that's with a plethora of drops, not just early in the year, but throughout the season, which makes it a little bit hard to handicap because you've added Cam Coleman, you've added a couple of backs, and you got to think you'll see a little bit of improved play overall from Ryan Wingo, who had a big second half of the year. So, 834 yards was the total for last year. Let's bump that up. We're going to go with 885. Ryan Wingo, who's pretty clearly the wide receiver 2 for Texas now. What are we thinking, over or under that total?
I'll take the over. I do think Cam Coleman will end up giving Ryan Wingo a lot of benefit there. And I think part of it starts with Wingo's not going to be asked to play as the X anymore. You're going to be allowed to move him around. Mm-hmm. You can do different things with him, whether that's using him in cheat motion, orbit motion, return motion, getting him on like running swing motion with him, doing different things to put him in advantageous positions that I don't think Texas got nearly as much of this year. Whereas I think his freshman year, you really saw when you could move him around and do different things with him. He was really explosive, especially because of how fast he is. And he's not necessarily the best route runner. He's not a guy who is going to break off a guy on a running a slant, or he's not going to immediately separate running a deep out, right? He's a guy who mostly wins with speed right now. And so when you can put him in positions where he's already got some speed built up and he can now attack a stationary corner, you feel a lot better about that. So I think inherently, just because of Cam Coleman's presence, similar to how Matthew Golden made Ryan Wingo's life easier, I think Cam Coleman's going to do that. And I do think that because I think Arch is going to get somewhere around 3,400, I do think Ryan will have a fair share of that. So I'll take the over.
I like it. How about you, Owen?
All right, walk with me here. Sark has been chasing the high of Worthy and Mitchell for 2 years now, right? Bond immediately trying to do it with Bond was a very understandable thing to do. We were all very excited for that. He was the next Worthy for this team, and it didn't quite work out. And if it had worked out with Matthew Golden, you would have had that. Also wasn't there this past year. I think people forget in 2022 that Xavier Worthy had hands problems. He also had 7 drops. Ryan Wingo had 7 this past year. He now on more targets for Worthy, not quite the same problems. But when he was the pure number 1 and the only other targets were Whittington and Sanders, the offense struggled. He didn't have a ton of yards. He was like 750. Then the very next year, he breaks 1,000 in I think a 14-game season or however many games it was. I believe 14. So I do think that just having Coleman there, the same way that having Mitchell there for Worthy, is going to make him, a little less pressure. A lot of drops are mental, and a lot of times players just don't have the same drop problems year over year. It's a big thing in the NFL when you're talking about wide receivers. And sometimes players just have a bad year and they drop a lot of passes. So I do think there is some inherent problems with Wingo's hands, and I know that's something that's going to be talked about all offseason. But like you said, moving him out of that number 1 role, that actual, and just being able to move him around the field, I actually think this is going to be the Texas leading receiver in 2026. He's going to get the bulk of the yardage. Now, does that mean he's going to be better than Cam Coleman? I don't think so. I think Cam Coleman's going to be a more impactful guy, not empty yards for Wingo, but Mitchell had 815 or something like that, Worthy had 1,015 that year. And at points there, Mitchell was clearly the number 1 guy. I think of the TCU game or that. I think of the Washington game. And that's where he was the more important player. And so I think you're going to have a similar dynamic there where Sark knows he's got these 2 weapons. Emmett Mosley can play that Jordan Whittington role. Nick Townsend can be a really good blocking tight end with also some pass catching upside. But I think Wingo's going to really eat in those underneath and have a lot of yak opportunities. So I'm hammering this over. I think Texas could have a pair of 1,000-yard receivers. I really would not be surprised if this is the number 1 receiver on the team. The drop problems are still a little bit there, but when you're winning more games and he's doing it at a less frequent rate and he's getting more yardage, and he's not having to be the number one priority for defenses, people aren't going to care as much. Also, he was a true sophomore, right? Only his second year. There was a true sophomore year for Worthy in 2022. Immediately a first-round pick by 2023. I think this is going to be a great year for Wingo.
No, I'm gonna hop on that train, Evan. I definitely think it's an over. I think that, like you said, you can see more explosive plays out of Ryan Wingo than you can see Cam Coleman, and it's because a lot of the things that you're going to be able to do. Y'all both touched on it a little bit, but when 2022, when Texas has Xavier Worthy, and of course this is when he has his hand injury and he's dropping a lot of passes. That offense looked a lot different when you added a true X receiver and Adonai Mitchell, and you're able to bring him in. He's playing that spot. You're able to take Worthy and do a slew of different things. You just heard all the different motions that Sark likes to run. You've seen it all out of Worthy, and again, different prospect from Ryan Wingo. They're completely different guys, but man, they're still very, very explosive with the football in their hands. Different type of runners, but still big time home run hitter potential. We've seen it out of X. You've seen it out of Ryan Wingo. So I will say I do miss Xavier Worthy being in a Texas uniform, man. That freshman season was pretty damn special. Good times, fun times. I think, we feel pretty similarly there. Let's go to Cam Coleman. I've got Cam at 1,040 yards. What are we thinking over under on Cam Coleman?
I'm going to take the over. I can't remember what he had at Auburn, but I think he had upwards of 700 both years. And that's with pretty dreadful quarterback play. I don't think you're going to get any argument about that. And I think what'll be so important for him is just the fact that you can throw a fade route to him, and you feel that's probably 60-40 odds in his favor, where you throw 5 of those a game to him, he's probably going to end up with 100 yards just off of that alone.
Sure.
And I do think the presence of Ryan Wingo, the presence of Emmett Mosley, the presence of Nick Townsend, and also Arch's legs is going to force a lot of teams out of too high. And when you start going away from too high, you can't cloud Cam Coleman anymore. You can't do some of the stuff where you're bracketing him, you're running cones, you're doing different things with him. You're not going to have that same opportunity. And I don't think many corners that are on Texas' schedule are going to be able to just defend him one-on-one. So that to me makes me feel pretty good about what he's going to be able to do. And also I think against some of these cupcakes or in some of these games, I think he's going to explode. I think there's going to be at least 2 games this year where he has over 200 receiving yards, just because of how explosive he is, just because of the hands. And a really underrated part of his ability is not only is a good separator because of his size and his speed, but he is really good at creating yards after the catch. So to me, I'm going to take the over, and I'm pretty bullish on him hitting the over there.
Love it. Love to hear it, man. What about you, Evan? 1,040 yards? You thinking over? You thinking under?
I am going to disagree a little bit. And you set me up so well here because he can still be a 1,000-yard receiver and hit that under. And that's what I think is going to happen is he's going to hit right there and get so close to that 1,000-yard or so close to that 1,040-yard mark, and be over 1,000 but not quite get there because, going back to that analogy, Mitchell had a few games where he would disappear a little bit. And, there was all that talk about draft stock about him not running routes fully and whatever. And I don't think for all things we've heard about Cam Coleman, one of the things I'm most impressed with is played 2 years on a terrible Auburn team, and you did not hear a lot of diva moments. This is a diva position with a player with a 5-star. He's been told he's a great player for 5 years now since he was 16, and you really don't hear about him that much, and that's awesome. That's a great player to bring into your team. But, I think there's going to be a lot of times where he's not going to have quite the stat line you're hoping for. Wingo's going to eat a little bit more, but when you need the 3rd and 5, who are you looking to? And when you need a touchdown, who are you looking to? So he's going to have more touchdowns than Wingo. I feel pretty confident about that, but I'll take that just under where you can have an 1,100-yard Wingo and a 1,000-yard Coleman, and everyone's happy. And Wingo's draft stock goes up, and Coleman knows that he's doing way better here than he was going to be at Auburn and places like Alabama and Texas Tech. So I'll take that slight under right there and slightly disagree with you, Pack.
Wow, first disagreement of the day. Got to shut the show down. Content's getting good.
He had a push. He had a push.
There we go. No, I like that. I mean, I think that you're going to see Cam probably, in my opinion, he'll be Cam, in my opinion, will clearly have more touchdowns than any other receiver of this group. I think he's a better red zone target, a guy that can win a 50-50 ball. But at the same time, we talked about mouths to feed. You know what I mean? And you've got Ryan Wingo, you've got Cam Coleman, you got Emmett Mosley, you've got some freshmen that will be sophomores by the time that rolls around. Then you're going to have a super freshman and Jermaine Bishop coming around. So how many touchdowns did those guys steal in some of these blowout games? How many yards did they steal in some of these? I'm torn on that over-under with Cam. I'll go over for the sake of the show. I'll say that Cam slightly goes above that number. But I definitely agree with you in saying that, you know, I mean, there's other guys out there. But when you need a really big play, like Evan said, and you have a 3rd and 5, when you're in the red zone, you know, I feel like the attention and the emphasis on getting Cam the ball will be at its highest then. So I wanted to tie these two together as far as touchdowns. 22.5 total touchdowns. Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo. You taking over? You taking the under on that?
Ooh, 22.5, you said?
Yes, sir. And no pushes here.
Yeah, no pushes here. Wow, that is tough because that's like we're pushing the 2 touchdowns a game for those guys here. I think I'll take the over because you're talking about a number 1 target in the red zone. You're talking about an explosive playmaker on the outside. I can't think off the top of my head how much Worthy and Mitchell were at, but yeah, I do think that there's going to be a few of the games. If Pack's right and he's getting a few 200-yarders, then they're going to smash through that spot, and especially if Wingo's going to still also be a good player. And Wingo, man, I mean, how many touchdowns did he have? Well, 3 of them on just screens that went for 60+. So right there, you can account for 3 or 4 a year. And then Coleman in the red zone by himself is however many you want to say. So yeah, I'll add to that. I think if you're going to say between running backs over or wide receivers over, I'd probably take the wide receivers for touchdowns.
I like that. I like it. 22.5, Pack. How you feeling there?
Yeah, I'll take the over because of what I said about, because I took the over on Coleman and Wingo's yards. I think it only makes sense if they're gonna combine for something like 2,000 yards. I do think it's pretty likely that they'll also get around 23 touchdowns, just because I don't know that Emmett Mosley or some of those other receivers, Nick Townsend, I'm not so sure that they're going to be guys that are going to be targeted super often in the red zone the way I think Cam Coleman, similar to how A.D. Mitchell, when you got inside the 5, at some point in that possession, you were going to throw a fade to him. And we saw how well that worked, right? The Washington game. Obviously, everyone remembers how he threw a fit, and then they threw the fade to him and he scored. I think stuff like that, you'll get Coleman to end up with like 5 or 6 that are just inside the 5. You throw a fade and he catches a touchdown from that. And then because of his explosive ability, I do think you get another 5, 6, 7 from that, maybe 8. And then you can also get, I think Wingo is going to have his fair share just because of, one, I think you didn't see it as much this year, but I do think you're going to see more goes and more post routes get hit from Arch to Wingo. So that'll add another 8 or so. So I'll take the over on that. Not the most confident over I'll ever take, but I do think they'll hit it.
I was torn, man. When trying to make that number, I was at 23.5. I went to 24.5, dropped to 21.5. It's going to be somewhere right around there. I feel like, you know, these guys are going to get in the end zone. Like you just said, I think you're really going to see Cam Coleman in the red zone a lot. How many touchdowns, as I said earlier, how many touchdowns are these backs taking in the red zone from these guys? How many touchdowns is an Emmett Mosley going to have? I got him at 3 right now for what it's worth, just so y'all know. I think Emmett's going to have a good year. He's going to be reliable. He's going to have some big 3rd down conversions on his own. But I think in the red zone, you know, you're really going to see them utilize the blocking of Emmett Mosley and then the athleticism of Cam Coleman, the screen game with Ryan Wingo and these backs too. So I can definitely see Pack, you being right there, that he's just really not getting a ton of looks down there in the money zone. But let's talk Emmett Mosley real quick. I've got Emmett Mosley at 512 yards. Don't ask how I came up with it, all right? Just a lot of random math.
12.5.
Yeah, let 512.5. Let my 5-year-old pick. Over under 512.5 yards for Emmett Mosley, the 4th of his name.
His name. That's an Ian Boyd classic. I do think I'll take the under there because you're just talking about the amount of mouths, and I think there's 5 playmakers in the offense that are just going to be more prioritized, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and then Manning himself with his legs and scramble ability. I do think Mosley really, on the idea of scramble ability, gets a lot of he'll get a lot of extra chunks of yardages from just extended plays and running a route and needing to go run a slant. But then when Arch Manning scrambles around, he's finding spots open, and that's 30 yards right there. I thought DeAndre Moore did that really well, more in 2024 than he did in 2025. But that's where I can see Mosley thriving. He also had some really good routes where he's running just one-on-one on the outside, hits a corner, comeback route, 15 yards, boom. I think the Oklahoma game with Manning where that worked out really well. So there's that part of him, but I don't think he's as prioritized. I think a lot of his focus will be learning how to be a slot full-time again, because that's kind of what he was in Stanford, and he was a really good blocker there. He had a lot of yardage numbers at that spot, but I just think he's less of the priority. He probably understands that too. From our interactions with Mosley, he's a very calm guy. So I think that this is someone where I'd be happy with 1,100, 1,500, and you're really happy with all that receiving production, and then whatever else you get from the running backs and Townsend and Masunis is just leftover extra. That's nice. But yeah, I'll take the under. I think he's still going to be a good receiver, but like 2027 is where he and Lockett and Bishop could really eat on the outside.
Yeah, no, well said, man. He seems to be, all about the team and just doing the right things. When you have that type of attitude when it comes to blocking as a wide receiver, that just, it tells me a lot about just where you're at and how you do things and what, ultimately what matters to you. You know what I mean? Doing the dirty work. So, yeah, I'm torn. I think I'm going to go under. I'm going to go with around 490. I think we see him on some big third downs. I don't think we see him, as we said, a ton in the red zone. But he will make some big plays just because I feel like he has a good understanding of that position. And like you said, Evan, when a play is broken, and Arch is scrambling around, there seems to be a little bit of a connection there, between Arch and Emmett. Emmett seems to be in the right place a lot of times. 3.5 touchdowns. You going over? You going under for Mr. Mosley?
I'll go just barely under. I think it'll be 2 or 3. Like I said earlier, I'm just not so sure that he's going to be a really big part of the offense inside of the red zone, just because he is a really good blocker. So you probably want the ball on the perimeter. It's Ryan Wingo more in those situations. And even this year, I don't think he had many. And that was without Cam Coleman around. I think he might have had 3 this year. So just based off of that and the mouths that are there to feed, I imagine it'll be probably 2 or 3, but I do think he's going to end up with around like 500 receiving yards, just because he is such a good route runner. I think he complements Coleman and Wingo really well in that way, where you're going to have Coleman, who's a pretty good route runner, and then you have Mosley in the slot, who's a tremendous route runner. I do think there's a chance that Mosley ends up being Arch's security blanket, where if it's not there, or if it's a 3rd and 5 and you need someone to get open, you're throwing it to Emmett Mosley just because of his ability to win with nuance in terms of understanding how to run a route. Mm-hmm. So, 2, so the under, but still having a great year for me.
Well, I think what you look at with this is Mosley had 3 last year in 9 games, so he missed three games, and then he didn't even have one in the bowl game, so that's really 8 games that he had it. So that was with worse receivers in the red zone, but maybe also worse overall red zone offense, or in the offense getting to the red zone itself. So that's Court. I think you've had a lot of really good lines here. That's Arch and the Colemans and Wingos. I felt like have been really tough decisions. I will take the over here, probably in that range of like 4, 5, because I don't think Sark's going to forget that Mississippi State game. 1-on-1, Caldwell throws that ball. He had 2 really good touchdowns in that game, and especially that OT winner. Like, that was a really, really nice catch, a really nice route. So he's going to be really nice in that 15 to 20 range where you can run a slot fade. And if you're caught on a nickel, and if they're playing, if it's a team that plays more of a run stopping nickel look, then that's a mismatch for Texas. And so that's where I think you're going to have a few of those. I do think each of these guys is going to get 1 or 2 of theirs against these UTEP or UTSA. I keep saying UTEP, UTSA and Texas State. So if he's exiting out of conference play with 2, I think he can get another 2 in SEC play for sure.
So that's where I'm at, man. I keep telling myself he's going to have 2 before Texas goes and plays a conference game. But what does it look like in the conference play? Who gets, the portion of targets and stuff in the red zone? Time will tell. I'm going to stick with 3 for now. Love the guy. I think he's still going to have a very productive year. As Pat just said, he listed several reasons why he helps this team. Great route runner, very physical as a run blocker. And again, seems to have a lot of trust from Arch and Sark both. And yeah, he had 3 last year, but again, wasn't really a part of that offense. Obviously until he got back from injury. You saw him some in the Florida game. He could have had 3 touchdowns in the Florida game alone if we had a little bit more time to protect our quarterback, because I felt like he was running scot-free all night long or all afternoon. Yeah, big time. All right, one more guy that we're going to do, and then we'll let everybody get out of here. We're going to go to the tight end group. We're going to go with Big Nick Townsend. Still has a little work to do as far as, route running, a little bit raw with his route tree and just understanding the nuances of running routes. But so Nick Townsend, I've got him at 360 yards. What are we thinking? This was completely spitballing because I have no clue what his role in the passing game looks like next year, especially with all the targets. And again, him being a little inexperienced there. What do you think, guys? 360 yards. And let's go with a touchdown and a half. We'll knock out two birds with one stone.
Do rushing touchdowns count into that?
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, then I'll take the over if rushing is involved with that for the touchdowns, because they are going to use him as an H-back in the red zone. I think that's where you're going to see the fullback dive, whether it works or it doesn't. I think he might be their best option for the on the 1 yard line or on the 2 yard line. Sark's just not a big QB sneak guy, it doesn't seem, and that's where you see Townsend against A&M, how he got that dive or the kind of end around opportunity, had the dive against Michigan. That didn't work. It wasn't a touchdown, but it was a 4th and 1. So I'll take the over on touchdowns. I really do think this is a blocking specialist development year for him as a receiver. I think 300 will be pushing it. He's just not going to be that important to the passing game. I don't think. A lot of just security blanket, make sure you're in a good spot if Arch needs help. Not going to ask him to run a lot of, maybe some posts down the seam, but not a lot of pure route running options. You're not going to see the wheels early in the season that you saw from Jack Endries. But you never know. If two teams give him a 60-yard tight end leak, that's 120 yards right there. And then you have 10 other games to figure it out. But I'm still going to probably hit that under. I think the touchdowns are going to be there, but it's, he's going to be a true sophomore, a guy who came to the team late last year and isn't really regarded as much for his hands. So I'm not going to be surprised if there's a little bit of drop issues and they're focusing on him as a blocker. But, between him and Masunis, maybe that's where you're getting that 360. But I think it's going to be around like 285 around that spot.
Oh, well said. So you're going under on the yardage, but over on the touchdown and a half. Okay. What you got, Pack?
Yeah, I'll go under on the yards and then over on the touchdowns because I do think he'll be a weapon in the run game just because of what we saw against A&M, where you can put him in a sniffer spot and then run some sweep plays with him. You can hand the ball off to him in the red zone, and he's a pretty tough guy to bring down, especially for DBs. Right. But in the pass game, especially when Texas is in 12, with the offensive line the way it is right now, I imagine a lot of the protection stuff is going to be 7-man protection where they're keeping both of the tight ends in, and then they're releasing Raleek Brown or they're releasing Hollywood Smothers into the route pattern. So just for that reason, it's hard to imagine him getting all the way up there, especially when you have the 3 receivers that we mentioned earlier and the running backs. So I'll take the under on the yards.
You saying over on the touchdowns?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with both of you. It's hard to know exactly, like Evan said, when is he, if ever, in the 2026 season? Is he ready to run that full arsenal of routes that Sark likes to use from his tight end, from the middle screens, from the leaks to the wheel routes, getting up the vertical, blocking, releasing, like those types of things. Because as Evan said, if the team gives up a wheel route to the guy, that's almost a quarter of his yardage right there on one big play. And so I don't think we'll see that early. Like you said, you can do a lot of the same things that you want to do with Texas in the tight end position. You can do a lot of those things. And as far as in the passing game, you can do a lot of those with the backs that Texas added this year. And so as he comes along, I think you'll see more of an emphasis on getting those guys involved with the screens. I guarantee you'll see probably both of them release on a wheel route. Probably, late slide up or a late run up the seam. There's a lot of different things you can do with that there. So curious to see how Sark uses it all. What do we think the tight end rotation looks like? Anybody want to take that one?
I do think Townsend is your starter, at least coming into camp. He really asserted himself as the number 2 throughout the year. And with Endries gone, that they're going to trust what they already have. But Masunis is a really good add. That's an NFL-sized tight end, and he's coming in to block a lot. So 12 personnel is going to be better this year. You're going to see a little bit more, and it's not going to be that bashing your head against the wall against Florida vibe to it. There's going to have some people movers on the edge of on the outside with tight ends and tackles. And then I do think Sark loves his NFL style stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if you see some Spencer Shannon and maybe some 13 personnel. But Shannon's going to go very under the radar because he just kind of stuck around and people haven't heard about him since. But that's another guy who's probably going to be a better blocker when he comes into the game this next year than he was this past year, and that's his 4th year in college at Texas. So they're gonna have good blockers at tight end, but that's the third guy there.
He will be better. I can guarantee you that. I mean, it's a guy that didn't quit after having a really rough start to the season. He was pretty bad as a blocker on tape, and by the end of the year, it's like, okay, man, they don't have the same I'll say it, the same cringe feeling when I see him out on the field as far as lining up in 12 personnel, because it was really, really hard to watch earlier in the year. And it wasn't lack of effort. It was never that. It's just he had a lot of work to do. He's got to get bigger. He's got to get stronger. These are grown-ass men he's dealing with as far as linebackers, SEC defensive line. So, yeah, I do think you see Nick Townsend, take off and run with the number 1 spot, just because I think he'll bust his butt in the offseason, do the right things. He probably will not be the threat in the passing game that Masunas is. Not that Masunas is going to light the house on fire. He's not, in my opinion, it's not going to be a Jack Andrews or a Gunnar Helm, and obviously like a JT Sanders. But he still will be able to do some of the easy things. He'll be able to run a quick out, a hitch. You can block and release a guy. You can do some things with Mr. Mike Masunas. So curious to see how that looks. A good question there. Thanks for watching, my friend. All right, thoughts on college sports expansion into League of Legends and how this affects NIL.
What is League of Legends?
It's a video game.
Yeah.
Oh, is this like an esports?
They're getting the donors from League of Legends to come into college football. Northwestern's getting a rebuild.
Is that like a big money game? Do they have?
Yeah, I think so, but I have no idea what this means.
I don't either. I felt really dumb for not knowing what League of Legends is, so I'm glad Pac asked and not me, because I definitely knew it was video game related. He said, ignore that question. Hey, we're glad you're asking a question, man. There are no dumb questions around here, okay? We're going to be
old man.
We'll be on a three-way call for an hour talking about League of Legends strategy as soon as it's in. I don't know if I'm going to say that that Matthew Golden has underperformed as much as I just say, like, they really did not, kind of like they have handcuffs on the guy. At some point, it feels like they turned that man free. You obviously saw the big play he made late in the season. Pac, you're a little familiar with the Green Bay Packers up there. What are your thoughts on Matthew Golden and his future?
Yeah, I don't think it's a Matthew Golden thing. I think it's we had a lot of receivers in the room. We had like 10 guys that were playing for us in throughout the year. So it was some of the opportunity stuff. And also there's times he was open and Jordan just didn't get to it, whether it was because of something pre-snap where he's running a go and you see it's too high. So that eliminates the read. And now they run buzz rotation. It's single high and you've looked off the go and now you don't throw it. There's a lot of external factors there. I don't think much of any of it had to do with Matthew Golden. I thought when he was a part of our offense, he played really well. Obviously the touchdown against the Bears, but even early in the year, I thought he was really impressive. And I think next year you'll see him really, really play well.
Yeah, I think he becomes a big part of that offense next year, bigger part of that offense. Any thoughts on that, Mr. Evan, who obviously really knows his stuff?
I really know my stuff. Yeah, it was infuriating to watch sometimes, when, especially that first touchdown was the most important one of their season at that point on that little bubble route. So I do think Dobbs has probably gone in the offseason. I know there's been some frustrations with him. So hopefully that opens up. You just put Reed in the slot, Golden and Watts on the outside, and he has a little year 2 bounce back. So, yeah, I thought he was a little underutilized. He also, he was going to have some growing pains coming into the NFL. He didn't have a lot of college production before, week 9 at Texas. So hopefully year 2 breakouts there for him.
Definitely, man. And again, having a healthy QB1, it's going to matter there too. I know there's some injuries there in the last season, but man, I'm very excited for Old Championship Sunday here, getting to watch these 4 teams play. Even if one is down a quarterback and it feels like they have 0 chance of winning this game, could be wrong. That's why they play the game. All right, gentlemen, this was fun. A little over, a little under. Evan will be back next week. Hopefully, Pac will be as well. Next time Pac's on here, we're breaking out some whiteboard. We're going to show a little bit of must-champ sets, how he aligns to certain looks from different offenses. I'll play OC. We'll see what Pac can do to shut me down. All right, we'll have some fun with it. But all right, guys, anything else before we get you out of here?
No.
Join tomorrow at I think 11:30. I'm doing something with Homer. We're talking a little bit we're starting off teaching you guys the must-champ defense. I'm going to walk you guys through how middle field close coverage works, starting with alignment and assignment, and then we'll go from there.
Let Pat cook. That'll be a fun segment and a fun addition to the old Inside Texas YouTube channel, which, speaking of, make sure you've subscribed and you're out there liking all the content. We've got one more question here. Jaden Blue or Javonte Williams?
That's not how you spell Jaden Blue. Got to be a blue head, even with the cleat problems.
Jaden Blue. I don't know anything about Javonte Williams in the league at all. So
I will select Javonte Williams, and I will leave it at that. That is all I will say. Do we think Kalik would be a good rotation with one of the wideouts? What do y'all see as far as Kalik and how he fits in the offense?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a weird comp, but I think he's a mix between Ryan Wingo and Cam Coleman, where I think he does a lot of the stuff that you really like about Cam Coleman, but he's also got some of the more twitchy athleticism that Ryan Wingo has. So he's a bit of a blend of both, and that's why I'm so excited about him. I remember telling Ghost and a lot of people this: if Texas didn't get Cam Coleman in the portal, it wasn't like I was going to fret about it, because I'm a really big believer in what Kalik Lockett's going to be, whether that's him getting snaps this year or the next year. I think he's going to be a stud. I think he's a future first-round pick. So if you can get him in the rotation, the more the merrier with elite receivers.
He'll be the first outside guy off the bench for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. And real quick, to same commenter, which running back gets the most minutes? We talked a little bit earlier in the show, my man. And these two gentlemen, these finely high knowledgeable gentlemen, had the opinion that Hollywood Smothers would be running back one, maybe looking at like a 60-40, 55-45 split somewhere as far as carries go. And I do expect Hollywood to be the better of the two backs in pass protection. So I think you'll see him out there a little bit more, third downs, things like that. No, man, we love you. We appreciate you watching, and your cool avatar. That's pretty great. All right, we got to answer this one right now. Who wins the Super Bowl? Again, we still got a couple games to go, but I feel like by now we can make a fair pick. I'm going to go with LA. I'm just not going to bet against my guy Matt Stafford, who Clayton Kershaw didn't strike me out, but Matt Stafford did, and so that's the connection there. But no, I'm not going to bet against McVay, against Matt Stafford, and I do think whoever comes out of the NFC ultimately is the Super Bowl champion. But wouldn't be shocked to see Seattle win that game at all. Who do y'all have?
Darnold just doesn't have that championship identity. He doesn't have it. I'm going the Rams as well. I'm with you.
Just because I'm a Drake May fan and I had some pre-draft takes on him that I need to age well, I'll take the Patriots, but I have no idea. I haven't really.
They've already aged well. Are you kidding me?
No. I said it's a specific take about Cam Cole, about what's his name, about Caleb Williams and Drake May that I need to age. It was about a Super Bowl and some other stuff, but this is like my perfect opportunity for that take to be like a home run take. So I need the Patriots to win. So for like no other reason than my own personal agendas, I'll take the Patriots.
I will say this: I like Vrabel as much as any coach is maybe in NFL history, just because of the way he handles himself. I love that. Even with the Titans, he seemed to just be a bigger thorn in people's sides, and they probably should have been, especially considering that Aggie Ryan Tannehill was playing quarterback for those guys. But again, you can do a lot of things with Derrick Henry and a pretty good defense or defensive mind. You know what I mean? They overachieved a little bit there. So no, I wouldn't be shocked to see it at all to see New England go in there and compete. Brady is my favorite athlete of all time, so there's a weird part of me that kind of likes the Patriots just a little bit, but not an NFL guy. I mean, I like the game, but as far as favorite team, so I'm neutral. I don't really care. I just want to continue to see really good football played because, man, this playoff season has been a downright blast overall. Let's see here. Any more questions we want to get to? Out of these guys, defensive player of the year, if it has to be one of these guys, I'm going to take Ty Anthony Smith just because I think him under Muschamp, he'll really, really kind of be unleashed and unlocked. I think he'll only get better in coverage. He obviously can rush a quarterback, pretty violent and filling lanes. So, but yeah, what do you guys think of these four guys? Who do you think's the best defender next year for Texas?
I'm on the Biles train. I think he's a special type of tackler, and he finds himself in the backfield too much that I think his counting stats are going to look really nice on the stat sheet. So I'll take him probably slightly over Littleton. I think Littleton's also going to be great, but yeah, I'll go Biles.
I'm with you on Ty Anthony Smith. I think he fits what Muschamp wants to do really well. Already this year, a lot of the way he fit the run was how Muschamp wants to fit the run from a stack fit perspective. So I think it's a really natural fit for him. And then either him or Littleton out of those four, I think Littleton's going to end up getting moved to corner, and I think that's going to fit him a lot better than nickel would, especially for a Muschamp defense and um, some of the different stuff you have to do in the run game as a nickel. I don't know that he has the ideal size for it, but I think he's going to be great at corner. So Littleton or Smith, flip a coin between those four guys.
Well, let me ask you this, Pack. You just mentioned, personally, you think there's a chance that Littleton moves to corner. In that scenario, who do you see at star for Texas or at nickel?
So if it were me, and I don't know what they plan to do with Bo, but to me, I would move Wardell Mack there. I think just from a body type and from a coverage standpoint, I think you can do a lot of different things with him. And I think he's physical enough to where you can like do some of the different stuff where your nickel's a force defender and he's got to fit the run pretty aggressively. I think he fits well with that. I think he's good enough in coverage where you can play catch with him, you can play scooch, and you can play cover one. You can do some of the cover three stuff with him. I think he's versatile enough in terms of his skill set. So to me, it'd be Wardell Mack. I think they're going to try Bo Mascow there. I'm not so sure how I feel about that. I haven't watched enough of him to have like a well thought out opinion on that. Roberson also wouldn't be bad there. I wouldn't mind that. And then an underrated shout that I think I would like is Kobe Black.
Yeah.
Great size. Was really physical in the A&M game. I think a lot of this stuff. And then the thing is too, when someone plays the star position, there's almost a certain level of you have the ability to hide them in coverage because
Right.
there's a lot of concepts where one, you don't have a vertical carry, so you don't have to worry about your speed getting you beat. And then there's other times where you're getting such depth that even when you are having to get a vertical carry, you have some level of cushion there that helps you. So Kobe Black would be a really good spot there too. Those are the three names that I would be most interested in. And then if you none of those guys work, then you just move Littleton back and you manipulate the run fits and you stunt to get the ball away from the nickel and force it to the weak side. And you can do some stuff there.
Absolutely. Again, a lot of people, you look at Kobe Black from last year, you see what Wardell Mack what it looked like when he was on the field. I would pause before making any assumptions about what they'll look like in 2026. This is, in my opinion, going to be a much better defensive staff as far as the changes that were made. And I think a lot of these guys are really, really going to benefit from those changes that were made, which is probably the reason that they all happened. But I do appreciate you guys in the comments, continuing to ask questions, giving us things to talk about. We'll always be here to answer. But again, hop on over to Inside Texas. Take advantage right now. Be a new members joining for $1. That link to join is in the description. The link to join is in the description of this video. It's the first link that you'll come across. So come hang out on IT with us. Join today for just $1. But guys, Evan, Pack, this was fun. Thank you very much for doing it. Thank y'all for being here. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching.